My name is the Reverend Gerry Lynch, Team Rector of the Wellsprings Benefice, 5 parishes outside Devizes. So how I arrived in the Diocese of Salisbury was I needed a job, and I looked in the Church Times late one Thursday evening, and there was a job being advertised as Director of Communications for the Diocese of Salisbury. I applied for and got the job and came here in June 2013. And then I went through the system of vocations, discernment and selection through this diocese. Then in 2018, I went to Oxford for 2 years to train full-time at St Stephen's House, came back to the diocese in the midst of COVID in 2020 for a curacy at St John's Devizes, and then I moved an enormous 2 miles to take up my current post as Team Rector. So I would say I was always the odd one out at primary school and things, which is quite tough when you're a kid, but actually it's been a great asset in life. If you don't necessarily feel like an insider anywhere, it means you learn how to function anywhere. During the time I was training for ordination, it was actually at the end of my first term, so just a few weeks before Christmas, and at the end of term I had come down to Salisbury for a night or two to see friends, and then I was driving back to Oxford to pick up my stuff and go to Belfast for Christmas with my family. And I was driving up the A34 between Salisbury and Oxford, and I kind of thought to myself, and I said to God, if it's your will that I spend the rest of my life in this part of the world, I'd be quite happy with that. So I'm a bit young to say definitively what's going to happen to me. I've got probably a bit over 20 years of working life and then retirement. But it wouldn't surprise me if I stayed here. I come to know this place very well. I've come to know Wiltshire in particular very well. Also Dorset through working for the diocese. But I've come to know Wiltshire very well. And it kind of is where I feel at home. It's interesting, so quite often when I'm walking in the countryside, I do that a lot. Somebody will encounter me and hear my accent, and they'll say, oh, you're not from around here. But then quite often I'll notice they have a kind of Essex accent or something from the southeast. I'll go, you're not from round there. And I'll go, no, you're not from around here either. For some reason they get quite stroppy at that point and say, oh no, I'm from Hertfordshire, whatever it is. But actually I do know more about this county than a lot of people who've lived here all their lives. But belonging is always a relatively transient concept for Christians, because ultimately the place where we belong and we'll find our ultimate belonging isn't of this universe, and it's only in heaven where, as St Paul says, we will finally truly know, even as we ourselves will then be truly known. So there is always something a little bit transient in Christian belonging. It's not actually an idea that's absolutely unique to Christianity as well. Rumi, the great early medieval Muslim philosopher, counseled Muslims, be in this world as if you were a stranger and a traveller. And if we look at the Old Testament in particular, there is always this sense of travelling and never quite arriving, thinking you've arrived only to find that exile was round the corner. So there is something about living in this world without being consumed by